Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, where the shadows tell their secrets and your chilling fan stories come to life. I'm your host, Gideon, guiding you through the unexplained, the eerie, and the downright hair-raising. Before we dive into tonight's story, I've got something special for you. Visit paranormalnightshift.com to claim your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in our Dimensional Desperado series. Discover how Buck Shadow Sheriff Freeman's journey into time-traveling paranormal adventures begins. Don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the darkness. Tonight's tale comes from one of our listeners, Walid, and it's titled Third Floor Apartment. Get ready to be pulled into the unknown. This one might have you sleeping with the lights on. Arizona has always been my home. I was born and raised there, and I've lived in nearly every corner of the state: Phoenix suburbs, Flagstaff, Winslow, and Tucson. But wherever I went, the paranormal seemed to follow. Every place I've lived has come with its own eerie experiences, but none stand out quite like what happened when I moved into a third-floor apartment in Peoria. I was excited to have my own space, especially since my roommate was often away for weeks at a time, helping with her family's business. The apartment felt perfect at first, quiet, private, and with no one above me. And for most of my time there, no one below me either. I loved being alone, and the stillness was a comfort. But it didn't take long for that comfort to turn into something much darker. It began subtly, as these things often do. The first signs were odd feelings, nothing you could put your finger on, but enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I'd be sitting alone, and suddenly it felt like someone was watching me. The air would shift, heavy and oppressive, as though something unseen was hovering just out of sight. I chalked it up to paranoia. After all, I'd had my share of paranormal experiences over the years, so maybe I was just hypersensitive. Then came the noises. At first it was random tapping sounds that seemed to move around the apartment, impossible to pinpoint. Sometimes I'd hear the blinds sway as if someone had brushed past them, the soft clinking of them touching each other. But I had no pets, and the air conditioner wasn't on. Even if it had been, it wasn't strong enough to move the blinds like that. I'd walk into the room expecting to see something, but it was always empty. The sounds became so frequent that I eventually stopped noticing them. It was easier to ignore them than to obsess over what might be causing them. But then came the night when ignoring wasn't an option anymore. I came home from work one evening, exhausted from a long shift. The moment I stepped into the apartment, I felt it, an overwhelming sense of dread. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel the tension pressing down on me. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. I checked every room, every closet, even under the bed, convinced someone had broken in. But the apartment was empty. Still, the feeling didn't leave. I double-checked that the front door and balcony were locked, then crawled into bed, hoping that sleep would bring relief. Instead, it brought a nightmare. In my dream, I was trapped in my bed, unable to move or scream. A man stood in the corner of my room, staring at me with a sinister smile. His eyes were hollow, and his grin was far too wide, stretching unnaturally across his face. He began walking toward me, slow and deliberate, and as he reached me, he pressed his weight down on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't escape. I tried to wake myself up, screaming internally, but it was like I was stuck in some shadowy limbo. Then everything went black. When I finally jolted awake, I was drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I'd never had a dream so vivid or terrifying. It felt like more than just a nightmare. It felt real. I turned on the radio for some background noise. anything to make the silence less oppressive. It was 4 a.m. and I had a double shift coming up. I tried to coax myself back to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I'd see his face again, that awful smile. The next morning I went about my routine, trying to shake off the lingering fear. My bedroom faced the bathroom, and if the door was open, I could see straight into the mirror above the sink. As I walked out of my room, I glanced at the mirror and froze. There, standing behind me in the reflection, was the man from my dream. He wore the same sinister grin, his head tilted slightly as he stared at me. My stomach dropped. I spun around, expecting to see him in the flesh. But the room was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, the reflection was normal. Just me, wide-eyed and trembling. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my keys and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I was safely in my car. I didn't go back for 24 hours, and when I finally did, everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. For months, the activity stopped. No noises, no strange feelings. It was as if whatever had been there was gone. I even started to convince myself that I'd imagined the whole thing. But then, late one night, it came back. I was watching Netflix, procrastinating on chores. When I finally dragged myself to the kitchen to do the dishes, I left the TV on pause. The screen was black, with the Netflix logo bouncing around. The blinds were open and I could see my reflection in the windows as I stood at the sink. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual, but then, in the reflection, I saw a man standing behind me. I assumed it was the paused TV image, but as I stared, the man turned to his side, his profile clearly visible. And then, he vanished. My blood ran cold. The TV screen couldn't have shown him, it only displayed the Netflix logo. And I was on the 3rd floor, surrounded by shorter buildings. No one could have been outside. It was impossible. From that night on, the activity escalated. The knocking began, on the bedroom door, the bathroom door, even the walls. Each time I'd open the door to find nothing there. My roommate, who was rarely home, started experiencing it too. She confessed that she hated being in the apartment alone, saying it felt like someone was always just out of sight, watching. Eventually, we both had enough and moved out. I often wonder if the next tenants experienced the same things we did, or if the activity stopped after we left. Whatever it was, I've never forgotten the man with the sinister smile, and I still make sure to keep my bathroom door closed, no matter where I live. And that wraps up this thrilling journey into the unknown. Walid, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with us. If you enjoyed this episode, consider supporting the show. You can join us on Patreon for an ad-free experience and exclusive access to all future adventures of the Dimensional Desperado. Plus, Patreon members get extra perks, so don't miss out. Not ready for Patreon? No problem. You can still support us by subscribing to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube. While you're there, drop a comment and let us know what you thought about this episode. Your feedback means the world to us. And don't forget to visit paranormalnightshift.com to grab your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in the series. It's the perfect way to dive even deeper into Buck Shadow Sheriff Freeman's wild and mysterious adventures. Finally, if you've got a story of your own, don't be shy. Head over to Paranormal Nightshift to submit it. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and stay tuned for more spine-chilling tales from Paranormal Nightshift.